So the new Hearthstone set has been officially revealed. It's Into the Emerald Dream, and we have a bunch of new cards to take a look at here, including a handful of different legendaries, some new mechanics, keywords, all that fun stuff as always. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. Try to get through this a little quicker than usual. Starting off with Ysera Emerald Aspect. So Ysera is back. She is a 9-mana 4/12 dragon. She's got this big old start of game. Increase both players' maximum mana by 5. And then Battle Cry gain 3 mana crystals. So do keep in mind those are not just empty mana crystals. So you are going to refresh a little bit actively, which means, kind of like this costs 6 as soon as you get to turn 9. But also that start of game's crazy, right? Like just a bunch of mana. Imagine both players have this. That's immediately going to be able to push you up to 20. There's still other stuff beyond that, like New Heights or whatever it's called, that could push you even further. So we're talking about some big potential mana totals. So that means, of course, you're going to have to be able to take advantage of that more than your opponent. So you might need to run ramp cards yourself to accelerate into those higher mana totals faster than the opponent. That could help you, net that mana advantage. You have 13, they have 8 or whatever. Clearly that's a pretty big delta. But then also, of course, you just need bigger stuff. Like, hey, I've got 14, 15 mana. I know how to use it. Maybe the opponent doesn't. They're running all small cards. I will say, if you get to a point where you're at like 15 mana, it may not really matter. The opponent hasn't already won the game. If their deck's not, well positioned to take advantage of all that mana, you're probably losing anyway. That said, you can also just explicitly open up new OTKs and card combinations that otherwise wouldn't exist. So it may not just be like a value bomb overwhelm late. It may be, I need specifically 12 mana to interact with this exact crazy lethal combo. So I'm going to run Ysera just to do exactly that. So there are definitely some angles for this. I also want to talk about another legendary here. This is Neralex, Herald of the Flights. That is such a long name for a Hearthstone card. He reads your dragons cost 1, which when you're playing Ysera, remember she's also just gaining you 3 mana crystals. So like on 8 mana, you play this, you get 3 more mana crystals to play more 1-cost dragons, which that could be a win condition in its own right. Just like overwhelm the board with giant crazy stuff that they can't deal with, or again, some kind of like combo that really deals with their board and sets you up in some specific way. So this is actually a pretty interesting 1-2 punch as well. I think this might actually be more of a reason to play Ysera than like anything inherent to Ysera, although I think she also has some pretty cool reasons for that. I will just say, I think specific decks and game plans are certainly required for Ysera. I don't think this is just something necessarily any control deck tosses in. It might be okay, but it's it's taking up a slot. It's not exactly perfect in those worlds. So I think Ysera is really strong, just a little bit specific. So taking a closer look here at Neralex, big old 7 mana 7/7. Dragons cost 1. I will say, this is not a card you can just like play out on turn 7. Obviously, it's never ever going to survive and set you up for later. So you are, waiting until you can do things simultaneously to this card, or maybe try to cheat it out a little bit early sometimes as well via discounts, or of course druid ramp, etc. You're getting this down on turn 4 or 5. It could create some absolutely monster swings. Whereas alternatively, if you kind of wait to the natural lifespan of this, where you're maybe playing it on like turn 10 because you want 7 plus 3 additional mana to play 3 dragons, that's a little bit late. It might not have quite as much swing or impact at that stage. So you are, again, probably going to have to lean into this pretty hard, not only with rewarding dragons available, and keep in mind they did cut stuff like OG Alexstrasza from the core set, so you're not going to like use this to set your opponent to 15 and just murder them. We're going to have to find some other way to win, which there will probably still be some. But again, this is a fairly narrow build into sort of card, which doesn't by any means limit it. I think it's still going to be really strong, and there will be a specific deck or two in a set that's laden with dragons. Like there's just going to be a ton of dragons this set that Neralex will definitely find some reason to see play, because clearly the cost discount stuff is always scary and always finds a way to be broken, and I don't think that'll necessarily change here, particularly in combination with that Ysera. All right, so moving on to our next card, just got freshly revealed. This is another new important type of legendary. This is one of the wild gods. Every class is going to get a wild god. It's like a big legendary thing. And Aviana here is for Priest, a 9 mana 7/11 with this crazy battle cry. Start a 3-turn lunar cycle. When the full moon rises, your cards cost 1 this game. So basically, you're on a little bit of a delay here. You start this clock for the lunar cycle. When it ends, all your cards just cost 1 the entire game, which is an absolutely insane payoff and pretty crazy win condition, right? Particularly if you're able to generate enough stuff to kind of fill in all of that mana, because you don't want to just play like 2 cards per turn anyway. You need to generate a lot of resources. So I will say, it's a very delayed sort of win condition, because this is a 9-cost card, so that's coming down late. This doesn't have any survivability baked into it right away. And the 1-cost cards don't just like inherently win you the game. Like if your opponent is still enacting their own OTK or crazy game plan, they don't necessarily stop that or just win right away. It's not as decisive as certain other win conditions. I mean, just think about like Wheel Warlock, right? Like the wheel just sets up to straight up end the game on its own clock. And, it has some more downsides baked in that this doesn't have. It costs a lot to play. It doesn't do anything on board, right? Like it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I do fear that for Aviana here, there might be worlds where, you need some of that more decisiveness of even like Zarimi and Priest. It's a totally different kind of thing, but it has a decisive way to finish the game. This doesn't necessarily. It's like a big delay, big pass turn, and you're still kind of trickling towards a win condition, which might not be quite enough. It depends a little bit on the meta. If it's just like a straight up like value meta and there's a bunch of late game decks and you have time to play this safely, it's certainly going to win a lot of games just because you'll overwhelm them with the efficiency of all your cards. But in a more, lethal meta and a faster meta, Hearthstone tends to be more of the time these days, Aviana might struggle to get there and find the windows that it needs to win. So really cool card, really big, crazy effect, but maybe not quite as scary as it seems at first glance is my instinct, just because this one does take a long time to actually come online. All right, so moving on to our next wild god. This is Ursak, a 9 mana 6/14. This one is a beast. Battlecry, attack all other minions. That's both friendly and enemy. And Death Rattle, resurrect any this killed. So kind of a 2-part use case here. Clean up your opponent's board a little bit. This has that nice 14 health total. So hopefully you can survive a few hits, kill a couple 4/4s and a 3/3 or something. And then Death Rattle, resurrect any this killed, which if it dies while killing them, of course, which it often would, particularly against pretty big boards, right? Then you're going to immediately swing back into those minions that you just killed. Also keep in mind, this does hit your own stuff. So if you have, like some Death Rattles on board or something you want to kill, this could be a way to activate your Death Rattles immediately and then, resurrect them to get a second look at those same sort of Death Rattle upsides, which that's kind of a nice idea. I think, primarily though, this will be used as a defensive card control tool that swings the board, hopefully just wipes your opponent's board and builds you one of your own, which it does look fairly effective at that. 6 attack is a little bit shaky as you get into this stage of a game. Some decks will actually want to push beyond that, like other wild gods and stuff you'd imagine being just bigger than 6 attack might deal with. So that's a little bit iffy. Like, will it actually get to resurrect anything? How good is it going to be? If this was like 7 mana and maybe a little smaller, it might have a little bit more of a good window, I guess, for itself. I do worry 9 comes along a little bit too late for this sort of card. You might just need a more universal kind of removal. But there are, theoretically some hand buffs possible. A lot of the hand buffs tend to be for specific things. We've got, undead buffs. You got, of course, Zerg buffs now, which aren't exactly hand buffs, but so there is an angle to get this bigger, of course, and then it solves even more problems and probably feels even better straight into the late game, but maybe has that little bit of a gap otherwise where it's not quite big enough some of the time. I think there will still be boards and scenarios though where this feels fine. There's all kinds of little swarmy stuff that even comes down late, like make a board of 3/3s or whatever. This still deals with those problems, which is pretty cool. So I do think this is still a nice little control tool. Now moving on to our neutral wild god. This is Malorn the Waywatcher, which is important for a couple reasons. This is also going to introduce this imbue keyword, and imbue we're going to see on some other cards as well. Like, let's just take a look here at the Living Guardian. Basically, you will imbue your hero power, which is going to change your hero power on a class by class basis. They're going to be a specific set of classes that have these imbue cards. And for instance, like this is the Shaman imbue, Blessing of the Wind. It transforms a friendly minion into a random one that costs 1 more. So that's an evolve imbue. And then we saw a hunter one here with Malorn. Give a random beast in your hand +1 attack. It costs 1 less. Now the important part of these cards is that if you imbue a second time, all of the numbers on the cards are going to, on the hero powers, excuse me, are going to increment up. So for instance, Blessing of the Wolf will become give a random beast in your hand +2 attack. It costs 2 less. And if you imbue again, it's 3 and 3. Same thing for Blessing of the Wind. If you've imbued a few times, like this is going to transform a friendly minion into a random one that costs 4 more, 5 more, etc., becoming an absolutely monster evolve, a monster discount on Blessing of the Wolf. These hero powers actually look insane. And then with Malorn, if you've imbued 4 times, you're also going to set the hero powers cost to 1, which, like, man, these hero powers are kind of crazy. Malorn also gives you, a nice legendary wild god, which is going to be from any class. I think this should technically specify that, but I think the bucket solves that question a little bit. So you could get an Ursoc and a super discounted hero power. So this is kind of fusing a little bit of a value card with this crazy hero power upside for these imbue decks, and that looks pretty cool. I mean, the 8 mana here, this is again a very just like value centric kind of thing, or a setup for later kind of thing. Is your hero power going to swing enough with that 1 mana discount post turn 8, right, to play the Malorn? Is that going to be worth it? Because if you get to like turn 9 or 10, the 1 mana doesn't feel as significant at that stage, right? Like you could still just hero power play an 8-drop on turn 10. It's like, well, now I can hero power play a 9-drop. Like, am I really that excited? I mean, yeah, Ursoc's 9 mana, sure. Like, obviously there are scenarios, but I'll just say, like, a hero power discount like that feels less meaningful to me late in the game. It's almost like, I've imbued the hero power up. It's worth 2. I don't mind paying 2, and that 1 mana save turn after turn. Is that worth paying 8 mana for the Malorn? Like, you're taking a really down turn on the Malorn. I mean, this is kind of like a 9 mana turn if you want to hero power right away. Maybe there's a reason there. But I just will say, like, if this came down on, turn 4 or 5 or something, that 1 mana feels like it would start to make a bigger difference much, much faster. So maybe a ramp card again, decks that could cheat this out somehow might have a better time. But ultimately, I do worry about that. And then discovering the legendary wild gods, like, it's just value for value's sake there. Like, these do appear to be good cards, don't get me wrong, but some of them will be build arounds and stuff that aren't necessarily all that impactful. So I don't know, man. If I'm already running all this imbue stuff, I'm already working towards this hero power. Is Malorn a free addition to that deck, or is he still pretty hard to play at 8? I have some questions about that. Like, clearly the hero powers are going to be insane, but I feel like they're going to be insane anyway. I think Malorn might just come down like 2 turns too late to really feel worth it for some of these decks. So looking at a couple of these imbue cards specifically, so heading into a few of these imbue cards specifically, Living Guardians, 3 mana, 2/3 elemental for Shaman, Battlecry imbue your hero power, reduce the cost of a minion in your hand by 1. That actually sounds pretty great to me. The earlier you get these imbues online, probably the happier you are. So the fact that this is 3 feels pretty cheap. It's got a little bit of a cost discount baked in. That's great. Get a thing into play, start evolving it rapidly. Battle cries play really nicely with evolves too. Typically, like this is a small body now, but if you evolve this into a 4-drop, like suddenly you might be catching up on stats while still, of course, realizing a really nice battle cry. So I think like evolve in particular with these battle cry imbues, it just looks like a very, very good fit. I think this could actually be one of the go-to imbue packages. Shaman just makes so much sense for this, and this card looks actually pretty good for it too. So then over in a hunter, we have the Umbra Claw, a 4 mana 5/2 beast with rush and death rattle. Imbue your hero power, which again, this actually seems pretty solid to me. You could imagine this hero power being valuable with stuff like rush in particular. I'm buffing up the attack, so I take better trades with all my little rush stuff, and I'm making it cheaper. So the first time you play this, still pretty solid, right? Like 5 on 4, it lets you take a great little trade, and then your hero power comes online, you buff the next one, it's suddenly, maybe it's a 2 mana 5/2 with rush, and it's got like 7 attack, and it's like actually really good even into the mid game. Like all these little things, if we get more rush stuff, could play really nicely with Blessing of the Wolf. I will also just say, like, the cost discounts on this become so significant at some stage. Like, man, you might have your wild god discounted to like 1 or 2 mana or something, and create some crazy plays. So this bakes both like aggression and tempo into this hero power, and since it's got 2 numbers, I do feel like it scales really, really well. Like this one per imbue is going to get super strong, that cost discount in particular. So I could imagine, again, Hunter looking pretty good actually with this hero power, and Umbra Claw is certainly a fine card to kick things off. 4 mana's maybe a little later, but this might not be the earliest Hunter Imbue card, right? And in fact, we're going to look at another neutral Imbue too, which is much cheaper. This is the Bitter Bloom Knight, a 2-mana 2/3 with Imbue Your Hero Power. Again, we've only got the 2 examples right now, but I think there are going to be 5 total Imbue classes. These both look really good to me already, though. So it's like, man, I'm like high on these cards. I think there's only upside from here. Give another 1 or 2 of these hero powers looks great. That's just a bonus at this stage. But this guy's perfect, right? 2-mana 2/3, super early, super cheap way to get imbued. Also, just really nice and cheap to further imbue your hero power to upgrade it later. I think you're gonna feel super happy to spend 2 to like get another cost discount on your Blessing of the Wolf or another evolve on your Blessing of the Wind. And then like, this is a really good evolve target too. Push this up to 4 or 5 immediately after playing it with Blessing of the Wind, and you're really happy to have a big body for only kind of 4 mana in that case. So again, this just looks like a great imbue card. I think this package actually looks really strong. Moving on to another mechanic here, we've got Dark Gifts. These are, if we read this card, Creature of Madness, 2-mana 1/2, Battlecry, discover a 3-cost minion with a Dark Gift. And basically, whenever you discover a card with a Dark Gift, each of the options is going to have a different Dark Gift option. So it's one of these 10 things. You can see here, +2/+2 and elusive. Cost 2 less, but has -2 attack. Charge. Battlecry triggers twice, right? There's all kinds of little bonuses here. Randomly applied. They do have rules too to like protect them. So like I think the -2 attack can't go below 1. Battlecry only hits on Battlecry minions, those sort of things, to make sure they all kind of make sense. But just basically free upsides on your discovers. So, a normal 3-cost minion might kind of suck, but a 3-cost with +2/+2 and elusive, like, man, that's suddenly a really good card. A 3-cost that's, going to have double Battlecries is a really good card. So, discover cards like this are already sometimes pretty solid, and then just making them like much better with free stats and free effects and free bonuses, like, man, that's great. So these dark gift cards look good. I don't even hate this one, right? Like this is just like a good on curve play. Sometimes decks have these kind of like filler cards in the early game for like control decks, and like, man, all of these bonuses seem so good. Like, and it's just fun too to like get to pick a bonus. So I think this looks solid, and Dark Gift as a mechanic in general just looks really potentially very good, just depending on the cost efficiency of any given discover and the pool of discovers. For instance, we've got another one here, the Treacherous Tormentor. This is a 4-mana 5/4. Battlecry, discover a legendary minion with a Dark Gift. Now, I actually think, as these get more expensive and like legendaries still aren't the best pool necessary to pull from, like this one's a little clunkier to me actually than the last one, despite some of the specificity. Like I have a harder time envisioning a deck making room for Treacherous Tormentor. It's not as like cheap and flexible and reliable from a curve standpoint as our last card. So this is maybe not the best example of the Dark Gift cards, but we have even more like the Raptor Herald, Battlecry, discover a beast with a Dark Gift. This one's kind of in the middle at 3. We did see some beast synergy in Hunter. Like maybe it's worth it to like get all these discounted with your imbue Hunter hero power, make the Raptor Herald super cheap, get a big beast with a crazy bonus, like a big beast with charge, make it cost way less. There's some interesting lines there. I think we have, one more Dark Gift card here for Warrior. This one looks kind of insane to me. Dark Rider, Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, discover a dragon with a Dark Gift. This one is so crazy cheap. Also hyper synergistic for clearly a dragon warrior setup. Like this looks nuts, man. Like just awesome dragon that copies itself, awesome dragon with lifesteal or charge or whatever it is. This seems like a very, very good card, and just so cheap that you're very, very happy to get this free Dark Gift bonus and a free resource that's synergizing presumably with your deck really well. Maybe get a legendary or whatever. Anyway, that's like part of your game plan. So very, very good Dark Gift card. Also for Warrior here, we've got a Choose One card, because Choose One is apparently coming to multiple classes this time around, not just Druid. This is Ominous Nightmares, 1-mana shadow spell. Choose one, deal 1 damage to all minions, or give a damaged minion +2/+2. So we've also got some enraged synergies here as well. So either whirlwind or a little buff. I mean, I don't hate a little whirlwind. Also, if there's going to be more enraged synergies, this could be a great enabler. Could be a way to clean up tokens, divine shields, etc. Like, yeah, whirlwind has historically been a solid card, and this gives you a bonus that it's not just that enabler or defensive tool, but sometimes a nice little buff. Maybe some kind of lethal setup or something too. So looks really good Really nice for a cheap choose one. Also, Rogue is getting a choose one here with the Barbed Thorn, a 3-mana 1/3 weapon. Choose one, gain Poisonous this turn, or gain Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to all enemies. So, I mean, Poisonous is kind of cool, like lets you clean up a threat, but man, it's not great, is it, either? Like, I don't really want to take the damage on that. I'd rather just use a removal spell or something. And I'm just left with like my hero power weapon. Not my favorite. Alternatively, like the Death Rattle here, also not really my favorite. Like it's, you know, kind of takes 3 turns to naturally enact that Death Rattle. Obviously, you can equip a new weapon to make it faster, but that doesn't feel great either. You know, you don't really want to spend like 5 mana to do this and then hero power to deal 2 to all enemies. So I don't know, man. This card, I feel like could this be a 2/3? Like, wouldn't that be kind of okay to just make this better to base? I feel like there's gonna be moments where it's just like feels really clunky to play this, and it's like, you know, gain Poisonous this turn. Like, you can't like pre-equip this and wait on your Poisonous. You know, it's like, I have 3 mana, I want to just play the Barbed Thorn, but there's nothing I really care about hitting for Poisonous. Like, oh, there's a 3/3 on board, I guess I'll hit it, but I wanted to use this Poisonous later against a big, you know, Titan. There's no Titans, but a Wild God or whatever it is, right? And I can't, because I wanted to pre-equip this. I have to wait with this on hand. Like, this feels clunky and awkward to me. I don't think this does enough for what it is. So unfortunately, Barbed Thorn, not a great choose one in my mind, but still cool to see it in Rogue. So next up here is big old Shaman Legendary, which might play nice with some of the Evolve stuff that we've seen. Marithra is a 6-mana 4/4 Battlecry Resurrect. All different friendly minions that cost 8 or more. So this is a big payoff for some of those big Evolve targets, right? Or I guess if you're running these in your deck too, this could be a way to get just a bunch of big stuff. That seems harder to me. Like, you don't want to be just like playing stuff that costs 8, but you know, theoretically the Evolve gets you there much easier. It's kind of 2 mana per pop, hopefully with your hero power, and then Marithra comes in to build a nice big board. I mean, she's only 6, that's cool. I guess the question is, like, are you actually playing her on 6? How many 8 cost things do you have by turn 6? Probably not that many. There are like giants too that you could maybe cheat into play with Marithra. So the potential is there for her to create a monster swing on turn 6. Maybe realistically with the Evolve stuff comes down a little bit later just to give time for the Imbue to catch up. I'll also note, like, she's actually a pretty solid target to Imbue Evolve herself as a 6-mana 4/4. Like, she's small. You don't mind pushing her up to like a 10-drop or something. That could be a nice 8-mana kind of play where, you know, even if she only brings back like 2 8-drops, you get her into a 10, like you suddenly have a nice big board. So yeah, this looks solid enough to me. I think there is clearly a lot of output here for a 6-cost card. Just does require some setup. Moving on to another dragon warrior card here, I guess, the Afflicted Devastator, a 4-mana 6/6 dragon. So pretty big guy for 4. With Battlecry, deal 3 damage to all other friendly minions, which kind of enraged themed again, but probably really just seen as more of a downside here for the Afflicted Devastator most of the time, where it's like, okay, I'm behind on board, but I'm, you know, going to start swinging back on turn 4. Who cares about this Battlecry? I don't have anything anyway. Just want to get my big 6/6 cheated out. And then the Death Rattle here is really nice, right? Deal 3 damage to all enemy minions. So as the opponent starts to like deal with this problem, they kind of have this this downside of dealing with your own board, which, you know, they do have the informational advantage here where they get to dictate how this goes in. Like, they can trade in 2 3/3s, but that actually kind of makes this a nice recovery tool. If you've given up the first few turns generating value, doing whatever other things that this deck might want to do, you start to pull it back in the mid game with some of these bigger dragons. This is a good way to kind of instigate that swing back into your favor and, you know, kind of start winning the board back, because this is a card the opponent doesn't want to let linger, and they might feel like, hey man, either this is just going to punch me too hard as a 6/6, or alternatively, like, this is a ticking time bomb, I need to deal with this now. So you kind of create this friction, or maybe the opponent has to solve the problems for you, which I don't know, I could see that working. It's not my absolute favorite card, but it's got an interesting little line. Oh, and that's our last card, actually. So that is the Emerald Dream set so far. That said, let's go ahead and rate all these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Ysera Emerald Aspect is a 4-star card. Neralex Herald of the Flights is a 5-star card. Aviana Alun's Chosen is a 3-star card. Ursoc is a 3-star card. Malorn the Waywatcher is a 3-star card. Living Garden is a 4-star card. Umbra Claw is a 4-star card. Bitterbloom Knight is a 4-star card. Creature of Madness is a 3-star card. Treacherous Tormentor is a 2-star card. Raptor Herald is a 2-star card. Dark Rider is a 4-star card. Ominous Nightmares is a 4-star card. Barbed Thorn is a 1-star card. Marithra is a 4-star card. Afflicted Devastator is a 3-star card. yeah, there you go. Day one of Into the Emerald Dream. I actually really, really love this set. This is like the perfect kind of set for me, dude. I love how Warcrafty it is. I love the theme. I love big, crazy, like wild gods and dragons and stuff. Like this is almost like a set I would like design myself. I really, really love. Like if I had to pick, I mean, a set to make in the Warcraft universe is a pretty cool one. Also gives me vibes of what was it called, Emerald Nightmare, I think, the raid from Legion, like the first raid in the Legion World of Warcraft expansion. That was a really fun time for me. So pretty sick set, some really cool and interesting mechanics, like both Imbue and Dark Gift are cool. Love the Wild Gods. Pretty excited to dive into all these over the next like few weeks or whatever for card reviews. So thanks for joining me as always. Share your thoughts on these cards down below, and until next time, game on.